that's why it just matters so much.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there other questions that you have? Please.
Just one clarifying question. I just wanted to make sure I captured all the proposed ballot referendum that you suggested. The first was a ban, and please correct me if I've missed any or misstating them. Amending the charter to prioritize community land trusts when there must be a disposition of privately owned land. Ban the selling of liens to private entities via lien sales, and requiring the city, again, to prioritize CLTs. Was there anything else other than those? Yes. Publicly owned land. Thank you for that.
But yeah, I think those were the two. Banning the selling of, banning the transfer of public land.
At least two of you mentioned that you had surveyed the public lands, you know, the lots and whatever. Can you talk a little more about that? What did you find? What, you know, what was, yeah, what was your?
In East New York.
Maybe, can you, yeah, get to the microphone.
Hi, in the East New York Community Land Trust, we have a subcommittee known as the Land Use Committee. We realized that there were a lot of vacant lots in East New York that could be, should be used for community purposes. Currently, we surveyed this one particular lot that I know for a fact, because I lived across the street from it, has been vacant for over 20 years. How is it that this land is vacant when we are in a housing crisis right now, especially in East New York, where if this land was turned over, when this land is turned over to the East New York CLT, we will put there what the community, the residents around this land feels would help uplift their community. So what we do is we go out there right in front of the lot, we go to the businesses around it, we go to knock on doors, we ask them, what do you want to see on this lot? What will help uplift the community? It's not always about housing. Even though East New York CLT, we're about housing, but we're also about entrepreneurship. We're also about community, things that will serve the community. We know that our children, our up and coming children, need serious activities to keep them out of the streets, that maybe they will think twice about picking up a gun or doing something outrageous. So we want to be able to build what the community feels. And we're conducting the surveys. We're going to put out a report. We have another organization called HESTA that's doing some drawings and whatnot for us based on what the community says. Like I said, it's not always about housing. It could be about community centers, community services, health centers, Black and brown owned entrepreneurship, commercial space. I have a non-for-profit organization. I can't get it up off the ground because of the asking price for commercial space. For storefronts, it's outrageous. I'm a non-for-profit. Where am I getting this money from? The city doesn't just give out, you know, money. But anyway, the CLT is also, we're about doing what the community needs. It's about surveying the community. For-profit organizations that build in East New York and Brownsville, they get the land, they build, poof, and whatever they decide to put there, the community has to deal with. That's not what the East New York CLT is about. We're about getting the info from the community.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Does anybody want to add? I mean, okay.
So yeah, we surveyed every single publicly owned
Let me
vacant
try again.
lot in East New York. So 250.
Oh, yeah, now I'm on. Okay, but Ken is not on.
Every week with a group.
It's the same thing.
and we're actually checking the conditions and yeah. And so we've narrowed down the list to like 18 sites that are really viable for development.
Just quickly, in less than 10 seconds, to show you how much it means to do planning this way. In the neighborhood, that banner came from one of the sites that we're doing surveying. I think we have like over 100 surveys now for that site. That banner has been in that site hanging on that public land with the HPD sign that says, you know, no loitering, etc., no fine, for about a month and a half. So we brought it over today. Someone just took it over, brought it over. So just to show you how much people care about the, you know, the dedication in that messaging.
Thank you, Sophie.
There you go. Thank you so much for testifying today. I just wanted to make a comment, especially when you brought up Hester. I live in Staten Island, so I work very closely with the activists in the community, the organizers, and I know Hester came up in one of the conversations. I know they're doing great work. They are conducting focus groups. And like you said, not just asking the community, why do we need this space, right? It's not always about housing, as some of you mentioned. I know they're going in very much detailed asking, what is it that your community needs? What is it that your community went through the pandemic? What can better equip the community next time when a disaster does happen? Or what is it that your community, specifically BIPOC communities, and they're going specifically to those organizations that are around in the zip codes that were greatly impacted during the pandemic, because it really showed what the BIPOC community goes through, right? So I just wanted to make a comment that I know you are doing diligent work on your surveying, because I actually been hearing of all of the great work that Hester is also doing. So thank you for your leadership.
Hi, I'm curious how much these lots sell for when they're bought up initially, before they're resold to developers, but when they're sold by the Department of Finance to a private equity firm or whatever, how much do they sell for on average? Do you know?
Well, so I mean, I think the city just transfers them for $1 to for-profit developers. And then subsidizes the actual development.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
For $1?
yes.
We heard that before.
And then what happens to the underlying debt that the homeowner or the property owner was not able to sustain?
Okay. Oh, you're asking about with the taxing sale?
Yes.
Okay, so what happens? Oh, well, so what happens is the city sells liens to a trust that's currently run by the Bank of New York Mellon. It does a bulk sale. So then the trust then manages the debt. It's no longer, the city no longer has kind of control over it. And then the trust then, hires a third-party debt collector and all that, and then the trust forecloses. So the city kind of like wipes its hands of responsibility, leaving these homeowners to deal with this third-party trust that's not accountable to the public in any way. And it's incredibly difficult for them to do anything, because there's mistakes made and they can't correct them, that, they're adding fees. So it's a spiraling situation for property owners that have their debt sold to this trust.
Okay, I'm just trying to see what the city's interest is here. And if it's a financial interest, I'm just curious what Mellon Bank pays for to bulk purchase the properties on average, what they're going for. If, it's just a
Yeah.
point of information. If
Right.
in the future you could
Sure.
find out and let me know, I'm
Yeah.
curious.
So they get 72 cents on the dollar.
72 cents.
And so they're not even recouping the full amount.
Got
So it really doesn't make any financial sense for the city, really.
Okay, thank you.
And in my non-commissioner responsibility, there are plenty of programs to teach nonprofits how to request resources for nonprofit organizations. So Ms. Deborah, if we can connect afterwards, I'd love to be able to help you think that through.
I have a question.
Oh, definitely.
I have a question. Any one of you could answer. I mean, what is your capacity in terms of like developing the land? For example, say, assuming that the city, sell it to you or give it to you for $1. Do you have like partnership or partners that would work to develop the land, whether it's like affordable housing or community facilities? I mean, I think that's one of the questions that people would ask.
Yeah, great question. Well, there's a whole, ecosystem of nonprofit developers, with good track records of building like deeply affordable housing. And we plan to partner with them. In East New York, there's several, including Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation and others. So, yeah. So we don't see ourselves necessarily as a developer, but we are a community land trust, so we'll hold the land to make sure it's permanently affordable. Yeah.
Thank you. Very thoughtful and very helpful to us. Very, very much appreciated. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. The next persons to speak are Paula Siegel, Scott Huthig, and you'll have to help me, and Izoria Fields. Paula, Scott, and Izoria. Are you Paula?
I am.
Why don't you begin? Hi, good to meet you. Right at the mic, right there.
Oh, am I to start?
Yes.
Yes, okay, don't sit down, just start talking.
Just come on
Great.
it.
And it's a little weird to have my back to you all.
So,
I guess I'll face this one. My name is Paula Siegel. I am senior staff attorney in Take Root Justice's Equitable Neighborhoods practice. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today to the commission. And thank you so much to my clients and partners and comrades for letting me speak after you really set an incredible stage. So thank you so much to East New York Community Land Trust for opening up the evening. As some folks here know, Take Root works with grassroots groups, neighborhood organizations, and community coalitions to help make sure that people of color, immigrants, and other low-income residents who've built our city are not pushed out in the name of progress. I'm here today to summarize the list of 5 charter change suggestions my team has made in meetings with your commission staff, and to share details about one such key change, the creation of an Office of Community Planning that can support community groups in doing the technical aspects of land use applications that seek to operationalize community planning. Others have handily shared details about some of the other proposals, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up or lingering questions that commissioners have. These 5 crucial changes are 1 and 2, which you heard about already, the prohibition of municipal lien sales and the creation of a priority for community land trusts in the dispositions of public land, the addition of dispositions by the New York City Housing Authority to the list of actions that trigger the Uniform Land Use Review procedure, the elimination of judicial deference to decisions that are made by the City Planning Commission or the Department of City Planning and the Board of Standards and Appeals, and decisions that have to do with environmental review. And finally, the creation of an Office of Community Planning that can support community groups when they file their own land use application as a result of the kind of detailed planning that we heard about today. Community groups and community boards are in our neighborhoods. They're doing surveys, they're finding out our community's needs, We have a zoning resolution that was last updated in 1961. Since 1961, zoning changes have been made by developers that are motivated by their own financial interests and the city itself, and very, very rarely by community organizations that actually know their neighborhoods. There should be more of the third. And the only way that we're going to overcome the structural barriers to community organizations and community boards actually taking their planning efforts and turning them into the law that controls future land uses in the city is if they have access to technical assistance, particularly for environmental review. We've all sat through environmental review hearings. We've seen the reports. They're extremely technical. They're expensive to produce. And most of the folks who make them for developers or the city feel like if they worked with a community organization, their usual clients would avoid them. The conflicts of interest in this area are really deep. The only way to resolve this is a structural change in the charter that would create a publicly funded office of community planning to fill this gap. Thank you so much for the extra time.
Thank you. Scott? Scott, help me with your last name, please.
It's Hutchins, Hutchins.
If you could see what's on my paper.
Yes, my name is Scott Andrew Hutchins, and I am a member of Picture the Homeless. I'm a founding member of the New York City Community Land Initiative, and I was also the Green Party candidate for City Council in District 41. And I am here to voice my support for a restriction on the city charter to ensure that public land is always disposed to nonprofits and community land trusts. I spent 8 years and 3 months in the shelter system. Only about 8% of people live in the shelter system are white. It's something 80-some% Black and brown people. So this is a major issue. For years, the city has disposed of these publicly owned properties for $1, as you've heard previously, and that creates housing that's unaffordable. Not only is this supposedly affordable housing, not affordable to most people. A lot of what they call affordable housing is affordable to upper middle class people. So when we talk about affordable housing, we're generally talking about under 30% of the area median income. That's the kind of housing that we want to develop, and we need community land trusts to do it, as long as these for-profit developers are part of the game. And we don't think they should be allowed to use public land for a profit. They've displaced communities. We can see what's happened in downtown Brooklyn, for example. I'm currently in the City FEPS program. I'm in an apartment that's $1,999 a month, and it's supposedly a homeless set aside, which means they got a tax write-off for that. So this is not a sustainable situation. It's going to cause major displacement, and that displacement is primarily going to affect Black and brown people. So those are my main points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. Izoria Fields.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on today. My name is Izora Fields, and I am a member of the East New York Community Land Trust. We are a community-led organization of residents of East New York and Brownsville who are fighting for community control of public land. We believe that the community land should be developed by and for the community, giving us the ability to have the first right to publicly owned land in our neighborhood. As it stands, long-term Black residents of East New York and Brownsville are being systematically displaced due to speculative investment by for-profit developers with no ties to the community. And most do not give back to our community in a meaningful way. Additionally, the predatory nature of the tax lien sale process is adding to that aforementioned displacement of long-term Black residents of East New York and Brownsville. Families are losing their homes for the cost of their back taxes. In a closed system whose only beneficiaries are in a single trust at Mellon Bank of New York, we implore you to lead the way in adjusting the public charter to prioritize transferring public land to community land trusts and fight to revamp the tax lien sale process in a manner in which our neighbors, in a manner in which helps protect us and our neighbors from losing property to the tax lien sale and private investors, and allows CLTs to be prioritized in acquiring tax delinquent land as well as publicly owned land. And I would also like to make a clarifying point about the $1. So that $1 is the cost to transfer the publicly owned land, not the tax delinquent land. The tax delinquent land is being transferred for 72% of the taxes that are owed, right? So that's a significantly low amount compared to the current property value. Now, I personally grew up in East New York, right across the street from one of these lots that has been vacant for over 20 years. That's 2 decades. And it's infested with rats. They do not chop the weeds on a regular basis or anything. It's a dumping ground. A dumping ground and an eyesore to the community when it's land that could be used not only for housing, but it also could be used for other community needs, like community centers for our children who have nothing to do with their spare time, who can be in productive programs and things of that nature as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Izora Fields.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have questions or comments from commissioners? Please.
Thank you. It's at some later point, if someone could send me, I'm just curious what 72% of the average tax lien amount is on average. I'm just curious how much that is, because my question ultimately is this making a lot of money for the city, or is this making a lot of money for Wall Street is my question. But I'd like to see the numbers. I mean, I would actually like to see the numbers. Yeah.
Paula Siegel. Can I take this and go back over there? I feel weird with my back to you. Is that okay? So we would also like to see the numbers. One of the problems is the Department of Finance actually does this kind of blind. They do put together a lien sale book every year. The sale itself nets the city some, like net or gross, nets the city something in between 50 and $100 million. That is not very much money in the city budget. It is a drop in the bucket. What happens? And we don't the 60-day list. What's been sold, they don't do the calculations because at the moment of sale, the city washes its hands. They're no longer its liens. They belong to the tax lien trust. They start accruing fees and interest that then flow to the trust at that point. The trust hires debt servicers, they hire attorneys. The money doesn't all go to Wall Street. Some of it goes to the people who work for Wall Street, which is great. It's a great job creation program. We're asking you all to ask New Yorkers if they'd like to bring that job creation program in-house, bring back the Department of Finance staff that used to do the debt collection prior to 1996, create some good union jobs there. What happened in 1996 when this program went out the door, one of the benefits the administration got is fewer unionized employees in the Department of Finance to do this. And one of their responses about why they need to keep the lien sale is because there is no municipal staff to do the work that is required to actually make sure that there is an enforcement mechanism for the debt the property owners owe the city. So when the administration talks about the financial benefits of the lien sale, they add all that up, right? They say, well, we'd have to hire all these people. You know, it's pretty unreasonable. The actual money coming in is less than $100 million every year.
One last question, if I may. I'm sorry. One last question. Do you have, or is it available, a list of where all of these tax lien properties are so that you could map it out and overlay it with communities of color? Is that
Yeah,
available?
that's done. Yeah, where's Jacob? Jacob made some fabulous maps of the 90-day list. Is the 60-day list done? Jacob can send you some maps.
Okay, I think it will be helpful for the commission to see those maps as well.
Can I ask how many properties are sold through the tax lien sales every year? Do you happen to have that number?
It's thousands. Does anybody have a number off their head right now? Yeah. And it's thousands every year. It's something, the book 2 years ago was 80 pages with about 60 entries per page. What's the math? I don't know. Not that good.
Once a property is sort of caught up in this process, can you talk with us a bit, two questions actually. Can you talk with us a bit about the challenges that homeowners face once they've entered into this process? And I'm asking specifically because I'm a little familiar with this from low-income co-ops and what has happened with third-party transfer there, but I'd like to, if you could tease out a bit, what is the process for the original homeowner or landowner once they are caught in this process? And then in regards to the survey work that you all did, one of the things that I'm very much aware of is that in light of last week's election, having great ballot proposals doesn't necessarily mean that the public will vote for them. As you engaged in your survey work, were you able to get a temperature read as to how the community was responding to the issues you were raising and the points of advocacy that you were pushing?
So the issue that I'm seeing as a realtor, right, is that some of these homeowners are very old. They're very old, they've paid off their mortgage. Now, when you have a mortgage on your property, the bank pays the taxes out of an escrow account, right? You pay one payment to the bank, they handle that. Once the property is paid for and that education is not transferred to the children, to the grandchildren, or whomever is responsible for caring for the property, they think, you know, the house is paid for. My grandparents paid for this house over 30 years. Why do I have to pay anything? But they don't realize they still have to pay the taxes. They become tax delinquent. Some of them may live in the home, some of them may not live in the home, and they're still responsible for paying those taxes, but the bills are coming to the home. Now, if the grandparents don't quite understand that they still need to pay this tax and no one's taking care of it, it goes into the tax lien sale. And once it goes, they think they're lost, you know? And then some people even have the issue where people are coming to their homes because the tax lien sale list becomes public, right? People are coming to their homes and essentially swindling them out of their property. They get them to sign something, $10 for a deed, right? All you need is consideration. That's why the city is able to transfer lots for $1, is you need some type of consideration to transfer the property from one owner to another, right? So people are basically stealing deeds for $10. You know, this is the type of thing that people are faced with. And I think it's very crucial that we educate our people. Our people perish for a lack of knowledge, and the CLT is really big on community education. Okay, we've had the blinders on for a very long time. It's time to take them off and work together towards viable solutions, right? Because incomes are not going up as fast as rents or mortgages. And the overall cost of living, everything is going up. We see, you know, everything is impacted now due to the COVID pandemic, due to the lack of being able to ship things from one place to another. Everything is more expensive, but people aren't making more money. You know, I'm a realtor, and I've had older people call me because they're uncomfortable in their current living space and they want to find someplace else to live. However, on the Social Security that they receive, they cannot afford it. Like in black and white, they do not qualify. And once they're displaced from East New York and Brownsville, they have to move out of the city. Those are two of the lowest cost neighborhoods to live in. What do I tell them? You have to leave the city if you want a new place? That shouldn't be the status quo. And that's part of that systematic displacement we're talking about, because people are being priced out, and they're people that look like me, right? And it makes me feel bad because there's nothing, in the immediate sense that we can do. However, in the long term, what can we do? We can change the charter. We can, formulate the community land trust so that the cost of living doesn't rise so much in our neighborhood over time. We can keep it affordable for our people. They have all of these projects going up that are a part of the housing lottery, right? They're supposed to be affordable units. Some of them, the minimum income is $70,000. However, the AMI, the area median income for East New York, is more so somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. And so the question becomes, affordable for whom? All of these buildings are being built in our neighborhood, but the people who have lived there for 20, 30, 40 years can't afford to live in any of these new developments, even with the low income set aside. So what do? We have to do something different for our people. We have to come up with creative financing because, quite frankly, it costs money to build, right? It's not cheap. However, there's a huge gap between the cost to build and the mortgages that would have to be sustained behind that when we're talking about ownership, right? And what people are actually making. It's really disheartening. I grew up in East New York, but I've traveled the world from LA to Shanghai. I've seen tons of different cities. And I don't understand why, some people in East New York are living as if this is a third world country and this is a superpower of the world. I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
Yes to number one. Number two, and you did so wonderfully. Question number two on the results or the temperature read as it pertains to the survey work. How is the local community that you're engaged in responding to the advocacy that you all are?
People have been very receptive. And I think they're more receptive to us because we're them. We are the same group of people, right? Like we are plagued with some of the same issues that they're plagued with because we live there too. We live there too. And so they're happy that we are doing something about it because politicians have promised so many things over the years. There's an area in our neighborhood that doesn't have sewage. Okay, they're not attached to city sewer. They don't have proper drainage. So when it rains, it floods. They don't have sidewalks, so it's the likeness of a third world country. And so with us coming to them and asking them about their concerns and what they want to see, they're happy to give their input for a group that is like them. We're like them because we live here too and we care. For us, by us. That's our motto for a reason.
I know you asked about homeowners, but I think telling the story of what happens to a community organization when they're dealing with the tax lien trust really puts a fine point on what the problem is. So New York state law says municipalities cannot charge property taxes to charities that own properties in the city. New York City is not that good at following that law. New York City has made up a whole bunch of hoops that churches have to jump through in order to get their property tax exemption. In fact, from 1890 something until 2012, all they had to do was establish their exemption once and they'd be exempt from taxes. Then Bloomberg came into office and was like, what are they really, churches? I don't know, let's make them fill out some forms. And then those became annual renewal forms. And then the way Department of Finance operationalized that is they said, well, even if you've had an exemption since 1920, if you miss an annual renewal, we're going to start sending you a property tax bill. And of course, if you've had an exemption since 1920 on your church, you're not opening a property tax bill. It's always zeros. So then those folks were starting to get liens sold on their properties. New York state law says no municipal property taxes in the state for charities. Once the lien is sold, let's say somebody actually gets that notice and opens it, they call the tax lien trust. The tax lien trust doesn't know anything about any state law that says the city wasn't allowed to charge those property taxes in the first place. And lots of folks found themselves kind of in a foreclosure mill, right? And churches actually gave up and sold their properties. They made the kind of deals, maybe not $10, maybe $10, maybe $60,000 that you're seeing for homeowners. Some of them went through foreclosure, and if there's some money left over at the end, maybe they're trying to claim it. A couple of years ago, we actually got the city law changed so that the city is no longer allowed to sell debt that is accrued by charity organizations that have had a recent exemption to the tax lien trust. Suddenly, I'm hearing from council members' offices who are able to help churches work things out, because when they get the bill that is for some amount of money they weren't expected, suddenly they can call Department of Finance and they can say, oh, is there a form missing? Okay, let's get the form missing. Let's get this bill back to zeros. And it's a relationship with a government that's actually accountable. But when folks were getting those notices straight from the tax lien trust, there's nothing the tax lien trust was ever going to do. They're not going to call Department of Finance. They're not going to call the council member. I was handling a bunch of those cases. That's how we ended up getting the city council to pass a law basically telling Department of Finance to stop violating state law. But it's really night and day what the kind of help that folks can access when they're dealing with Department of Finance versus when they're dealing with the tax lien trust.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. I think Paula mentioned something very crucial, right? Nonprofits are not supposed to pay taxes on the property. However, there are all these hoops that they create for you to jump through, right? And it's the same thing with low-income individuals who apply for some of these mortgage assistance programs, home buyer assistance programs, okay? They have to jump through all these hoops. And they ask for tons and tons and tons of information because you have to prove that you're able to afford this property in the long term and you can repay the mortgage, right? And some of these things are, overwhelming people, right? Which makes them take a step back and say, maybe this is not for me, right? And then also, some of these processes take so long that the seller might not want to deal with that. So if you have the same offer as somebody else who's not getting a down payment assistance, who's not getting some kind of mortgage program, maybe Sony made through the state, that's helping them out to become a first-time homeowner, they're going to go with the person who's easier to deal with, right? And so that's also a part of, the systematic displacement of our people, because it's like now I can't even compete for a property in the neighborhood because someone else can buy it without the programs that I need because my income is too low to qualify for the full mortgage. So I need that down payment assistance. Maybe a lot of people are living from paycheck to paycheck. So it's hard to save up for a down payment. Also, even if they have the income. So that's a part of the problem too, is that these programs that allegedly are supposed to help are not that helpful and they're deterrents for some people. Thank you.
Indeed. Would you like to go ahead?
Earlier, some of the speakers talked about the need for community technicians or the land, like environmental experts, et cetera. So who would those technicians work for? And do you have any detail, like?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So here's how it normally works, and then here's what needs, and I'll tell you what needs to change. So if you are a private applicant looking to create a new zoning district, looking to rezone your own property, looking to create a special district for your neighborhood that requires deeply affordable housing and maybe add some requirements about small storefronts and commercial spaces, you need to put together a land use application. We've heard of what happens in Euler, but actually there's a lot that happens before Euler. And that's when Department of City Planning actually certifies your application as complete. Part of that certification is complying with the state law that any change that has a potential for environmental impact be analyzed, that the decision maker take a hard look. So it's a big report. Private applicants hire private firms. There's one called AKRF, there's one called Langen. There's a lot of small firms, but most of them make their money by working for L&M, Related, the developers whose names we see in the headlines. And when a community group wants to put forward a proposal that isn't in the interest of the general development community, all of those folks are like little, they hide.
I understand the argument for it.
No. So that's who they work for.
Yeah.
So they're always working for the applicant. So sometimes the city even hires an outside
No,
consultant.
my question is, in your proposal, what are you asking for?
So we're asking, so there's a report that we put out a couple of years ago that's called Inclusive City that I know we sent to staff a couple of months ago that details an Office of Community-Based Planning that would actually have folks on staff who could produce an environmental review report where they would actually just work for this independent office, a separate office that would be.
So your proposal is an independent office?
Yeah.
Sitting where?
It's a good question. When we looked at this question in 2017, one suggestion was the Public Advocate's Office. The report went through a process with a lot of stakeholders, and that's the suggestion I think is the one that makes the most sense. Other people had other ideas, and I think in the report, we didn't end up coming to a consensus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Very much appreciate your testimony as well. And we will likely be in touch following up. Thank you.
How do we send
all.
those maps?
Let's see, if you would send them to S. She'll come see you? Good deal. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Very, very much appreciated. We have two additional people who've
we have a general email address that's set up that's racialjustice@charter.nyc.gov. Also on our website, you can submit links to anything that may be online through the online input form.
Thank you, Nisha. So we have two persons remaining who've already signed up. And as I call their names, if there are others who would like to share with the commission members, then I invite you to come up as well. The two names that I do have are Esther Joseph. Please come up, Esther Joseph. And the second person is Ayani. And Ayani is accompanied by Aya. And your last name I can't make out, Lahens. Ayani and Aya Lahens. Esther, come on up. Come on up. And come on up, please, and you can take a seat up here. Esther, come on up. All right. So Yanni and I wanted to come take a seat right here. Thank you. Thank you. And then Esther, you can go right to the mic. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry. I just came 20 minutes ago, so I got to listen in on, much of the conversation. But thank you, everyone, for having me. What I would just like to say is this commission, y'all have a lot of power right now to do a lot of good. with this. And one thing I would like to say is, I grew up, I'm an immigrant, I came up here ever since I was 6 years old, so I've been in this country for 16 years now. And I've realized a lot with the city. The city is very diverse, or a melting pot, as many people would like to say, but in reality, I don't think we really showcase our diversity because of how segregated our communities, how segregated our schools is, how segregated our workforces is. And it's very ashamed because this is something that, we should be, New York City is the mecca of everything, but we're not showcasing that with a lot of opportunities, economic stuff, and so much on. So if anyone ever heard of us, I work for the God Squad, the 67 Precinct Clergy Council. And one thing I have to deal with is seeing youth. I have about 5 interns now that I work with, and most of them come up to me saying every day, like, I ask them, what are you gonna do after high school? They say, oh, I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna work as a dishwasher or do something like that. Like, they don't see nothing, nobody in their communities to showcase that they can do this, that, and the third in this world. And it's why, it's because of structural and institutional problems like this. One, in our schools, I remember going to my public school and, fortunately I had a college counselor, that's one. Most of these schools, they don't even have that. They just let these kids determine their future for themselves with no assistance, especially these kids that come from families where they have no one to look for. They have no one to help them with their homework, no one to help them with their college applications. And, luckily we have nonprofits like mine and other organizations trying to help and assist these kids in doing so, but it's not, we're limited in our resources and limited in so much that we can. And one thing, we rely on the community, we rely on the city, our government in order to help us do so many things, but we can't do so because of the reasons why we're here today. And that's just some backstory. Let me go back to why I'm here. Y'all have the opportunity to make not just structural changes, but transformative changes. And y'all use the term long-term. So many policies and stuff that I see that goes enacted is just for the short term, or it doesn't really do much to help and need the transformative changes that we need. So what I'm asking for from this commission is to make sure that y'all go through every single thing, and think about different communities. Think about how, I always hear the term diversity and all of that. Oh, I have a limited time, sorry. But I want to make sure that we really emphasize inclusion. That's not something I'm seeing at all within this city. And there's so many reasons that if I had to come here and talk about them, I will have y'all here for the next month.
I'm going to have to ask you just to be respectful to everybody else.
Of course, the
Okay.
time, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But yes, that's what I ask for y'all to just keep that in mind, when you make these
Thank
changes.
you.
Think about these kids, these families. Think about how we should be highlighting our diversity within New York
Yes.
City, but we're not because of these.
I'm going to ask you, I have to, because I don't mean to cut you off. Okay, it's not personal. I just want to be respectful of everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Sophia Layhans Wallace, and I'm with my daughter Ayani. We're with the East New York CLT, and we're here to just talk about public lands and having ownership, community ownership. Not very good at public speaking, as you can see. So my daughter's probably gonna be able to hit this home. But what I just wanted to say is that, she's my inspiration. She's always talking about wanting to have her own room, have a house, and opportunities like that seems to be dwindling in the city. I feel like we're being pushed out. It's going to private. It's not going to community. Opportunities to own homes have been dwindling, as I said, and I want my daughter to have roots within her own community. I bring her along to be involved so that she can see the importance of this and what it means to our generations that come after us. So I just pushing and hoping that you see the importance of home ownership and community ownership of lands that are quickly moving away from us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Would you like to speak? Come on. And as Ayani is coming, we're glad to have you. I'm going to ask Albany Scott to come up to testify afterward. Albany? That's the name I have. Albany?
Hi, I'm Ayani. I'm a member of the East New York CLT. Also known as the future leader, as he said. And I can say, so nobody knows that, none of my friends know that I live in East New York. It's pretty funny. I tell everybody all the time. And I can say that I live in a pretty diverse neighborhood. And I think all the residents should have a voice in what should go in their community, such as in the empty lots that we have been viewing. And it's kind of sad to see that there's a lot of empty lots there. And I have 2 minutes, 13 seconds. Okay. So it's kind of sad to see that there's a lot of empty lots there. And when we interviewed the people, we saw that they wanted different things there instead of just leaving it empty. And nobody was helping, not even the city. They weren't helping fix it up. And I was like, felt very bad because I don't live in that neighborhood, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ayani. Thank you. Just hold tight because we may have some questions for the three of you. Is there a fourth person? Albany? Okay, I'm sorry. They're giving me, they tell me it's based on what you all write. So I don't know. Forgive me. Albert? Albert Scott? Good to meet you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Racial Justice Commission, our community needs your help. I won't be before you long. As my bishop would say, you don't have to be long to be strong. The reality is, as you heard from our future leader in the making, we need access to the land. Public land should go in community land trust. Community land trust is made up of community members who has empathy and have demonstrated by volunteering tirelessly, especially throughout East New York and Brownsville, asking community residents, what do you want? What do you want to see? Which is totally new. We realize what happened in Bed-Stuy. We know what happened in Bushwick. We need the land use disposition bill to be on the ballot. So it prioritizes community land trust. Give us the tools to give us a fighting chance to fight back the for-profit. It has been demonstrated by giving it to the for-profit, they have been pushing us all out repeatedly, time again. Another East New York CLT member had stated and provided details in stating the following: the average median income, it does not apply to East New York and Brownsville. In that community, everyone knows the numbers. It's just a fancy way to try to push people out. We just need to give our community folks a tool, another tool to fight back. And we strongly feel if this is put on the ballot for next year, residents throughout New York City that mirrors communities like East New York and Brownsville, they will vote yes. And this will be and we need it now, because the other route would be the traditional way. We have to find a sponsor. We have to see which city council members want to do it. Then we have to pray and hope that the mayor does it. By doing this grassroots task to be the initial spark, that's what we're asking, is for this to be a spark for our community. We are energized, we are focused, we're here for the long term. It's been demonstrated. We was birthed out through a pandemic. We realized even through the tax lien sale, when our very own Leonie Taylor from Brownsville said in our meeting, have you ever heard about this tax lien sale that helps displace residents? I said, but we're in a pandemic. Yeah, but they look like they want to have a tax lien sale. So this economic fight that we're hoping if this is put on the ballot, this is a form of economic justice. And no one could say they're not for, cannot say they're for economic justice if they do not put this on the ballot or prioritize CLTs to take over public land. Give our communities a fighting chance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Albert Scott, if you would just join us over here for a minute. There's one more person that we'd like to bring up, and then we'll talk with this now organized panel. John Krinsky.
Thank you very much again to the commissioners for the opportunity to testify. I'm actually not going to give full-on testimony. My name is John Krinsky. I teach at City College, but I'm also a board member of the New York City Community Land Initiative, which is a coalition of more than 24 groups that are that include more than a dozen community land trusts and community land trusts in formation in the city. And all I wanted to say is that we fully support everything that you've heard from the East New York CLT, but I did want to mention that what they're talking about is actually multiplied throughout neighborhoods around New York. They are extraordinarily well organized, but there's also, you'll hear from groups when you're in the Bronx, you'll hear, this is something citywide, and I just wanted to emphasize that as well, that it's part of something even bigger. So thanks.
Thank you.
You said I should take this back, yes.
Very much appreciate the testimony provided by every one of you. And we're going to open up the conversation now to talk with our commissioners.
I'd like to ask Ayani, what are your ideas for some of the empty lots?
So I was thinking like there's not a lot of these around, but so I go to middle school and I sometimes have to take the bus home. And when I'm home, sometimes I wish like there was like, I wish there were like places where children can stay while their parents are like after schools, but the after schools that they have are a little more strict than normal after school. Like you can't use your phones. We don't want you to call your mom so you can get outside. Cause sometimes I call my mom like, I don't like after school, it's boring. I don't want to do this anymore. It's boring. And then I leave and then they get mad. They're like, don't play with us, don't play with us. It's like they're holding us hostage. So I wish there was more like after schools, but like they had like libraries in it, like make it more open. Like the after schools are more like daycares. Do you have any more questions?
I have.
So I do have a question in terms of some of the proposals that have been made in terms of, many of you have said, to prioritize. Is that enough? I'm concerned that if we say to prioritize, it still won't be done. You know what I'm saying? Like, so what kind of language or what kind of a little stronger could we consider?
Great point. I would say we could switch out the language and put on the ballot, give to CLTs, period. And if need be, provide the necessary resources, clear and direct. It's always great to make our demands hyper aggressive by stating prioritizing CLTs was more or less a friendlier way of simply saying, give it to the community land trust. Just to be that spark, to try something different, something new, something that we know that will work and that literally put communities on first. And like I mentioned earlier, we tried the old way. We gave it to the for-profit, that did not work. So now let's be bold and do something dynamic, and that'll be true form of economic justice and housing justice. Thank you.
I may just jump in here and say that I appreciate your asking the question and your response. I've been looking at community land trusts through some work that I've been doing. What I found is we have an added problem where there are middle income New Yorkers who are not able to afford homes here in New York City. And so there's a pushback. It's this, why would we do this and create greater opportunity for persons with lower income when we ourselves can't avail ourselves? And so we'd have to be very careful, mindful of that aspect as well.
Thank you. You brought up a great point. And that's why Ms. Deborah, I'm reading her mind right now from East New York CLT. That's why there's a big push, rather than saying the focus should be on average median income, it should be neighborhood median income. With that type of thing, then you'll be able to capture the quote unquote in East New York, the upper, the middle, and the lower tier. And then you'll see a more collectiveness as far as better opportunities. Because what's in, if you look at neighborhood AMIs for East New York compared to Brownsville or Prospect Heights, it is definitely different, and Bed-Stuy. So I definitely recognize that, but that's why the big push is definitely neighborhood median income focus. And that's definitely a different type of fight on the federal level because they're the one that dictates that AMI. So we're going to try to walk and chew gum, but the first thing first, community land trust, let's get the land first. And that's what I call one of those good problems to have if you give it to a CLT first. And then we could then focus those efforts on the neighborhood median income. But thank you though.
I think you have an answer.
I was just going to mention that one of the, what you're saying is actually sort of, exactly the horns of the dilemma that people find themselves in right now, because the other thing is that housing has to work, right? So the problem is, or the opportunity actually for, that something like what Al Scottish just said is that you can actually provide some internal cross subsidy in the unit, in the housing itself, especially if you have multifamily, if you have multifamily housing, but also actually if you have land, housing on land owned by a land trust, you can effect some kind of internal cross subsidies. And that's actually really important. It's what enables Cooper Square, for example, the Cooper Square Community Land Trust on the Lower East Side, to have apartments that are super affordable to residents and have been affordable for residents since they started in the 90s. But at the same time, we cannot abandon the mission of actually providing housing for very poor people as well. People who are with very, very low incomes, extremely low incomes, as Scott Hutchins was saying before. I think the important thing is that if you dispose of city-owned property to mission-driven nonprofit organizations that have this as their goal, you're going to be in much better shape than if you're disposing of property to a for-profit developer who might have some cross subsidy in there, but it's vastly inadequate to the need.
I had a couple of questions, and before I ask the question, I'm fully aware that you're testifying you want a change in the charter to take land that's under tax lien and transfer it to CLTs. Understood. My question is, my understanding of the new cannabis law that will take effect in April, I believe, is that the city will get money. And right now it's unrestricted. The city will be able to tax people who sell cannabis and get some money. And the state will also have a fund they create from cannabis sales. And my question is whether you've thought about doing any advocacy around those funds and saying these funds should be used for CLTs. Well, whether you've even thought about that.
I'm glad you brought that up. I am so happy. And we definitely, Boris, we're going to need to give them, we're going to need their information to send it, because we actually created an op-ed. The East New York Community Land Trust created an op-ed, and the title is simply Marijuana Justice, and understanding this new multi-billion-dollar industry that will be unfolding before us, and how a community land trust can play a role in that aspect, because we know community land trusts, whoever owns the land could actually dictate the affordability on a commercial level, as on a commercial level, as well as a housing level. So we have definitely been looking at that, and we're looking to definitely start up in the process, probably early next year, marijuana justice committee, because we're looking at that whole process and to bring it back, because we know folks, especially in Brownsville, East New York, went away for marijuana, and now it's legal now, and it's going to be a very profitable industry. So we have definitely been taking a hard look at that, and we definitely will forward you the op-ed that we created that goes in more details and specifics. Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, I just want to commend all of you who are part of the Community Land Trust for giving, I think, the entire audience, both here and virtually, a really good lesson in how to show up in a unified front. I'm currently trying to train people to do this work for redistricting, which is far less exciting of a topic, but you guys have really set a fantastic model. And to everyone who is watching, this is how you should be approaching some of these issues. So I want to thank you all for that. The God Squad, I forgot your name. I'm so sorry. Esther. Oh, perfectly well, okay. On brand, on brand. You had mentioned that as a commission, we have a lot of power. And theoretically, it would seem that that is the case. But the work that we're going to be doing is really to take everything that we're hearing from all of the folks who are participating in this process and distilling the several hundreds of pages of text that the charter currently has, and finding a few substantive, specific things that we can get on a ballot, like the suggestions that you all are making and very well advocating for, to take those suggestions and to distill them in some way to something that can be voted upon in the next election. The idea of creating more pathways towards a more integrated city is not necessarily something that is within the body of the charter. So while it might be a fantastic advocacy point, something that might be very important, it is not necessarily something that is charter-based and that we would be able to do something structurally with and reduce it to some language that could go on a ballot that could be voted on. Do you have any suggestions for specific recommendations that would go towards empowering the city to take a more integrative approach? And I'll use my language, an approach to social policy that is less white supremacist grounded in some meaningful way that we would be able to use. Because as presented, the idea of creating a more integrated space, again, great idea, not necessarily something that we have the authority to act on. So I just wanted to know if you had any concrete proposals that you would like to see on the ballot that would fit the parameters and the limitations that we all have to work with.
So yes, I think that's a great question, and thank you for clarifying that for me as well. And to just add on, just listening to the conversation and some of the things that you all have mentioned that would like to be on the ballot. One thing I would like to do, I would like to second that in the sense where you mentioned with what's going on with marijuana is going to be legalized, and then all those tax dollars. From my understanding, when it was determined to be legalized, they already said that, you know, the money that they're gonna, from the revenue of marijuana sales will be put back into the community that was harmed by mass incarceration and all of that due to marijuana and drugs and all of that, whatever. But I think, you know, to go on in our communities, we need more of these community centers like she just mentioned. One thing that I see is, you know, with these empty lots, there's nothing there. There's no housing. People, that's one way to build generational wealth is with you owning property, especially when it comes to Black and brown community people. But I do think we need more community centers. We need more parks. We need more places where kids can be kids. They don't need to be in the confines of these four walls in schools where, like you said, you don't get to play, you don't get to be a kid, you don't get to run around. There's so many places I see less football fields, less soccer fields, less activities. And most of these things usually lead to, we have stuff where we have childhood obesity and all of that. Like if we was to have more open spaces, I see they have, the initiative with the open streets and so on, but you rarely really see that in Brooklyn. You don't. It's most of these stuff I see is prioritized to more to Manhattan or these other places, but we don't have places where these kids can be free or after school if they can't go home, especially, I see these kids where after school, they don't know what to do, so they just look to the streets to go there. If we had these community centers built on these empty lots that's been vacated for years, for decades, we could do something with that. We can give our kids opportunity, and they're not only when it comes to the sales from marijuana, we need to have more centers for people that are dealing with drug issues. I'm seeing it all the time as somebody mentioned they with us occupying the streets. I see all these kids, all these people, they're asking for all of these things, and we have the opportunity to provide it for them, but we're not. What's the point of having space just sit there for decades with nothing? We can build these centers, we can build more housing for people, especially affordable housing. And I really like your point, and that's not something that I'm really hearing, is where we need to base the income based on the neighborhood. It's so many people I've seen out in the streets. I'm having friends that are living in hotels, going from hotels to hotels. Like, we need more housing. We need places to put these people. We need to take all of that where we can and find a way to bring it back to our community, not only to help us, but to help our kids. We need to help them prosper. And, we have this young lady, we have, this gentleman coming here and telling us all these things. And there's so many, I don't have no specific proposals, to give you, like you're asking, but at the same time, I, want to second what my community here is asking for, because this is the stuff that many people don't see or get to hear from the kids, because, you're the only young little girl I see her here. We're the kids, we're the people, so if I can, I'm able to speak for them. This is something that I see that they need. They probably don't know how to ask it, but I'm going to be the one here to ask it for them. And this is what they're asking for. They need more spaces for their kids, need to be kids. They need a place after school. If they, their homes are not safe, they can go there. They can go there for resources, opportunities, different services that we as a city, we could provide to them, so that this is how we help with racial justice, giving these people opportunity, giving them places that they could go to get these opportunities. And especially like when we're out in the communities, I was out there last week in the cold, 30 degrees, handing out resources to people and all of that stuff. If we had community centers like this, I don't know if you had to pay for this to be in this room or whatsoever, but something like this, the kids could come here, have an art show, do something, it doesn't need to be a school, but I know I'm talking too much. Let me give away to my, but yes, that's just, I think that should be the main thing. And once you have that done, it will trickle down and you will see improvements, especially when it comes, like we said, to racial justice and more equity within our communities. So yes.
Right. Are there other comments or questions? Please.
So what you said was very interesting to me. You said have more mind-blowing things. Like you said you had friends moving to hotel. So my grandma said that they had a homeless shelter, and then I'm like, well, you shouldn't call the people homeless because maybe they need extra time to collect the money or stuff. And you said it's not so safe for kids' homes. There's lots of movies where you see rejection, like people don't care. But if you really thought about it, there is people who care out there. Like, why are we here then? Do we care?
Thank you, Ayana.
Listen out for her, man. Listen out for her.
All right.
She'll protect Social Security and everything.
Got it.
I'm so
We
proud of
thank
her.
you. We're proud of her too, and we're very appreciative of all of you for coming and sharing with us and educating us. Thank you so very much. We have one more person who has joined us this evening to share. And this person is Jessica, help me. I think it's Jessica Franco. Yes, please come on up. The mic is right here at the front of the stage. Just as you're coming, some kind of rules of engagement. Please stand at the mic and you'll be given 3 minutes to share. And then after your 3 minutes, members of the commission will likely have a few questions for
Perfect.
you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Franco. I am a member of this awesome Brooklyn community. I wear different hats, but I'm here today as a mom. I am here today as a neighbor. I am here today as a friend and as a sister. I'm here to talk about the citizenship requirement on our civil service jobs, such as those of first responders. So currently, there's a citizenship requirement to join the police department, the fire department, and to join to be an EMT worker. I would assume that what should determine on whether or not someone is brave enough and has the courage to go and run into a burning fire and save someone would be whether or not that person is courageous, not whether or not that person is a citizen. And that is a shame of us here in New York City in 2021. We all saw what COVID did to us. We all saw how many of our family members died. And we saw how the excluded workers, the undocumented workers, the immigrant community stood by us. They filled our shelves in the supermarket. They delivered our groceries, okay? They delivered our medicines. They were there for us. And we can't even allow them to join a public service job? It blows my mind. So I was born in Mexico. And I grew up in a community where many of my friends are undocumented. And to see and grow up with them being in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, and see how they wanted to pursue a career. They wanted to pursue being a police officer. They wanted to pursue to be a firefighter. They wanted to bring aid and be an EMS worker. But they are not able to because of a citizenship requirement. It's not whether or not they're suitable. It's not whether or not they're able to. It's not whether or not they're smart enough, but it's whether or not they are a legal citizen. So I'm asking you today to please hear me and evaluate and remove that citizenship requirement. Allow those who have a legal permanent work permit to join the police department, join the fire department, join our EMTs, and I assure you that it will be a much better, diverse, stronger department, and we will be a much better unified city. We need to let our young people know that they do have a future here, and that this is their city. It is a shame that in 2021, those who want to join the summer youth program can't because of the citizenship requirements. What is the message we're sending to them?
Thank you very much. Please stay with us. Take the microphone. And I'm going to ask you to come over here so that we can look at you as we talk with you. We'll bring the microphone with you.
Thank you. It's been a long night for me. Thank you.
Well, we're glad that you made it here to spend some time with us. I have a few questions for you, but I'm going to ask other members of the commission.
Thank you, Jessica, for coming and testifying. Can you explain? So I know in certain parts of the country, right, people who do have DACA, right, are able to join the police force. So if you can explain to us currently in New York City, as you mentioned, right, the citizenship is one of the requirements. What about those that do have either DACA or work permit? Are they allowed to join either the fire department, the police department. So if you could answer that question.
Sure. So unfortunately, they're not able to. So if they have a green card, if they are a DACA, meaning a dreamer, or they're a TPS holder, if they have a work permit, they're still not eligible to join the police department, the fire department. Other states like Washington, Maryland, Colorado, Chicago, Wisconsin, Vermont, Hawaii are leading the way. They do allow their TPS holders and those who have a legal permanent work status to join their forces.
Do you know, I'm just curious, is there a federal like mandate or restriction attached to this, or is this just city-based?
So I believe it's a city and state issue.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
And currently, is there advocacy being done around that? And if so, and if it's not, how can we begin working on that?
Sure. So I know of other states who have and have been able to make progress, such as in recently out in Yakima, Washington. However, there are a lot of young people, such as those who are dreamers and who have who are TPS holders, who would love to join and who are ready, who have the credits necessary to join, but are stuck in limbo. And so it's really just a matter of changing and removing this requirement and giving them hope.
And in terms of summer youth, is that a city or is that a state
That's a city.
That's a city. Okay.
So unfortunately, our 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders, and college students are not able to participate in the summer youth program if they do not have a social security number or if they're not a legal citizen. That is a shame. That is a shame because these are our young people and we must invest in them. All they're trying to do is gain the same working experience that we all have been able to.
Jessica, and I'm asking these questions for those that are not familiar with DACA or when someone's a green card holder. So the questions I'm asking Jessica is for as well for all of us to learn together. And if you are not aware of this, so you could understand the rigorous process that even DACA holders go through to even obtain DACA, right? So Jessica, can you explain what someone goes through to obtain DACA, the rigorous background and also just in itself, right, to get the green card? Can you explain?
Sure. So it is based on application, and actually up until President Biden came into office, he was able to open up the applications for those who wanted to apply for DACA, because under President Trump, it was closed, it was terminated. And under the DACA application, it is a very rigorous application process that requires multiple background checks. And that in itself is, I would say is much more thorough than many of the background checks in our city agencies. Sure.
So to make it painfully obvious, just so we're clear and so the record can just be clear, we're talking about a population of young people, a population of New York residents who are willing, who have the physical capabilities, who are not a security risk of any sort based on the findings of the background checks, who are essentially being barred from meaningful participation in gainful employment because they happen to be born in the wrong geographic area.
That is absolutely correct. And many of them have been part of our community for many years. To be those who are considered dreamers, meaning they were raised here, right? They're part of our community. They went to our schools. And so it's a really harsh way to exclude them.
And just to be clear further, and I thank you for allowing us to have sort of these painstakingly simple questions, but again, just to make it clear, these are residents who aren't leaving, so they're still going to be here, and we still have needs that go unmet when we don't have people who are able to fill them. So we have existing needs, we have existing population, but we have paperwork barriers that essentially prevent us from bringing those two things together.
That is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, please go.
Well, I guess this is something we can research, but do you know if with the jobs you're talking about as well as summer youth, is it because of a federal restriction on the funding? Or
question that
is
I
it a
was
charter thing? Yes, that was my question. Do you know?
So for the summer youth specifically, I am not 100% sure. I do believe that it has something to do with the tying of funding from the federal government. However, when it comes to employment for our civil service jobs, there has to be a way, because other states and cities have been able to remove that requirement.
Okay.
So I'm curious about, like, as you've been doing this work, when you hear about the what are the challenges to moving this forward? What are the arguments that are put forward? I mean, here in the United States, we have several thousand persons who are not US citizens who serve in the military. So, if we're talking about a security risk or concern, I don't understand why it's okay to go fight, in another land for us, but it's not okay to fight for us here, if you will. So what are you hearing?
That is exactly what, and I just want to make shout out my husband, Carlos Ramos, and my daughter, Joy, who are out here. We are part of an organization of Mexican professionals, including from different public service jobs. And this is where these conversations are happening. And so to go to your question, that is exactly what young people are asking us. They're saying, how come we're good enough to go fight for this country, but we're not good enough to be part of our community here? And it's devastating, right? Because the truth of the matter is that we don't have an answer for them. And as these conversations have happened with multiple agencies and elected officials, the truth is that their response is, we didn't know, we don't know. And I get it, right? Because if it's not a personal experience, it's hard for people to be aware of it. But we have to be willing to do something about it. This is a demand. This is something that our young people need. This is something that our city needs. And so, yeah, I'm really asking that there's a revision into this and that requirement is removed.
I'm reminded in that moment, this moment, if you overheard the line, I don't remember who wrote it, but here lies, I think it's somewhere in Vietnam, here lies a tombstone. Here lies a Black man who fought the yellow man for what the white man took from the red man.
Absolutely.
Here lies a Black man who fought the yellow man for what the white man took from the red man.
I just want to thank you. And also, there's so much work we have to do across our communities to understand our interconnections. There were 200,000 Africans brought as slaves to Mexico, which is the same number of Spaniards that went to Mexico. So Mexicans are as African as they are Spanish. And we just aren't taught much about our history and our interconnections ever, to our chair's point. And I just want to thank you for raising this issue, because it doesn't just affect the Mexican community, it affects so many communities in New York, which you're talking about. So thank you.
Thank you very much for hearing me and for giving me this
Indeed,
space.
we really appreciate you. Your testimony concludes the testimony for this evening. And I just want to thank you. And I'm sure, I've heard other commission members say what I'm about to say concerning you and all who've come this evening. You have provided much, much food for thought. We leave here much better informed about some very serious, significant issues that we can try to affect changing. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank all of you for taking time this evening and for helping us along. Have a good evening, and thank you.